This is Monocle on Design Extra. It's a short show to accompany our weekly programme where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and graphic design. I'm Maylie Evans. Today we head to the London Centre for Book Arts. There, a current exhibition about consuming books, the Nijhof Lee collection, showcases the importance and role of the Dutch bookstore, which, though now defunct, was during its heyday a mecca for design book lovers. Monocle's Lucrezia Motta visited the centre to meet Simon Good, partner at the London Centre for Book Arts, and the exhibition's curator, Rose Gridneff.
Nijhof Lee were a bookshop that were open in Amsterdam from 1988 to 2011. It was a design bookshop primarily, run by two partners, Frank and Warren, who had an amazing collection of design publications, magazines, historical items as well. They used to host lots of exhibitions. And when it closed in 2011, I was working at University for the Creative Arts at the time. They were looking for a home for the shop stock. Their official archive went to the University of Amsterdam, but all of the remaining stock that was from the shop, so lots of publications, magazines, needed to find somewhere new to live. And Warren was really keen that it went somewhere where it would be used by students, where it would be accessible and where it wouldn't be behind locked doors, essentially.
So from 1988 to 2011, it was a hub for designers, big names, students coming in to get inspirations, learn about different types of typography and graphic design. What was the atmosphere like? What did it mean for people who came to that shop to be able to have all of this material?
So I only visited once, actually, and speaking to Simon, I think you're in the same position. But what's been lovely is putting this exhibition together, you realise actually what it meant to so many people. Lots of people have a story about the time that they visited Amsterdam and recall what they purchased in the shop. I think it was truly international. It was described as the best London design bookshop in Amsterdam, and that's reflected in the collection. Yes, there's absolutely a lot of Dutch material, but there's also material from around the world.
How does this relate to the work that you're doing today at the centre, this idea of creating a hub for creative people and to share knowledge in a very free and accessible way?
One thing that was said when we first opened the studio back in 2012 was that it was that idea that you build it and they would come. We didn't really ever have a grand plan, but we made the space, the equipment, the facilities, but also the bookshop, the gallery, all of these things became part of our home and our sort of offer to the public. And around that, we've found that it's naturally just grown into this lovely community of people that are all involved in books in some way, whether it's making them or reading them or whatever it might be, but involved in books in the broadest sense. And I think that's really important. That's really nicely with the exhibition as well.
Could you tell us then a bit more about what we can find in this exhibition and what does it tell us about the owner's affinities and interests in particular?
The shop was open from 1988 to 2011, and I think that's a really interesting period in graphic design production. Actually, when you're looking at the advent of the Mac, which was 1983, the democratisation of design, the idea of designer as author, and I do think that the content reflects that in a slightly time capsule-y way. Lots of the self-published material or items from student designers are from that period and captures something before social media properly took hold in terms of finding ways to disseminate work and collect design work. And also, of course, a lot of the collection predates that as well. Frank Nijhof worked in an antiquarian bookshop before he opened the shop with Warren, and so there is a lot of material that's historical, dating back from the 19th century, but also a lot of mid-century design as well.
And are there a few maybe surprises that came about while you were putting this exhibition together? The collection that's at the university, it's an immense number, and you only selected a few specific pieces.
So that was a real challenge because there's over 3,000 items in total, and I think there's 112 in the exhibition here. It was really to try and get an overview of what's within the collection and to select things from very well-known designers, but also to select things from student designers and to find a range of different formats, materials, colours, processes, to give a snapshot of what's there. It's overwhelming, actually. The collection is so strong, it was really challenging to hone down what people might enjoy seeing.
When we come into the bookshop, we were met with these sort of walls of colours. How did you want to set up the exhibition to sort of create this feeling for when people come in? You mentioned that you tried to make sure things weren't too hierarchical, that it was so quite free-flowing between the pieces, that you had big designers next to students. Time periods are kind of flowing together.
The aim was to not be too precious about it so that people could enjoy the content on its own terms and draw different connections between the items. Mm-hmm. The colour is amazing. That's quite indicative of a lot of the items that are within the collection anyway.
Are there any pieces in particular, this is for the two of you, that you found yourself particularly attached to, that you found really interesting, or that really surprised you, that you weren't really expecting to see?
Well, I think maybe Rose is a lot more familiar with the pieces, so it's actually really interesting to see. I think personally the stuff that's been letterpress printed from the sort of 60s, 70s, 80s that's in the collection, particularly like type specimens and things that we do have here in our library, but they're very different because you've got Dutch type foundries and so on. And so the difference between the two, I think, is quite interesting to see how they were done ever so slightly differently between the UK and the Netherlands. So I think personally those things are quite nice. Sandberg stuff that I think is quite beautiful. There's so much in there because the way that it's been set is like quite maximal. There's layers and layers of just really beautiful, amazing books.
There's some small pieces that were produced by the shop itself, actually. There's a set of postcards that I've interspersed amongst the publications that focused on the history of the street where the bookshop was. And I think that reflects the owner's interest in the history of where they were, of being part of that local community. And I think it's nice to show those to give a little bit of context. There's quite an amazing 1966 piece by Wim Krauw, printed for the Den Uden printing company, that was a reproduction of a poem by Remco Kampart. And there's very few of those available, and it's about showcasing what a printer can do. I think shows that Dutch heritage between print and design.
What reactions are you hoping from visitors, from people who come to the centre for workshops, for people who are just walking in? Curiosity, maybe a willingness to learn more about not just graphic design, but maybe also what the centre is trying to do as well? We
run workshops as part of our kind of regular programming, and so this weekend, for example, we've got a letterpress printing workshop, and I'm quite excited to show the class participants the sorts of things that you can do using the process that have been done historically. And the exhibition's a perfect opportunity to see the best examples of like letterpress printing in that sort of style. And I just think, yeah, I'm kind of excited to show my class all of that. Also, like, we get so many sort of visitors off the street that might not necessarily know that we exist because we're in a big old artist studio building that was built in the 1800s, originally as a printer's, but now it's been artist studios for 25 years. And so it's quite interesting when you do get people just stumble upon us, and I'm hoping that they'll be pleasantly surprised by the exhibition as well.
I think a big part of it for me is about accessibility, actually, and getting material out of archives to broader audiences to enjoy. Archival research can be very difficult. You often need to know what you're looking for to search for that item, to request it, whereas this is much more about getting some of that out in the public domain so that it can be celebrated and enjoyed, just as it was in the shop.
One of the pieces that's in the exhibition that we don't really know where it's from, so it came in a brown letter. There's not really any other information about it, but it's there and people can see it, which very much reflects sort of that spirit.
Items like that enable people to draw their own conclusions, actually. And I think not knowing who a designer was of something can be quite empowering, because perhaps within a different context, that piece of work may not be celebrated in the same way.
Rose Gridneff, and before that, Simon Good, in conversation with Monocle's Lucrezia Motta. About consuming books, the Nijhof Lee collection is on show at the London Centre for Book Arts until the 29th of March 2025. That's all for this week. If you're eager for more design stories, then listen to our main programme, Monocle on Design, airing on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. London time. Or if you prefer print, you can pick up a copy of Monocle magazine, available on all good newsstands now. Today's episode was produced by me, Maylie Evans. Thank you very much for listening.